is going on YouTube? It's your boy Dan, aka aDrive. I bring you guys a very special video today. I'm super duper stoked for this one. We're gonna be jumping into the world of Pokemon Go PvP with the Pokemon Go World Champion. I mean, that's pretty nuts, man. We got PoGoKieng right here on the call, and he just recently won the 2019 World Championship Pokemon Go Invitational. What's going on, King?
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thanks aDrive for having me on your channel. I'm super excited to talk about Pokemon Go PvP.
Yeah, dude, I'm so stoked to have you. So for those who don't know, Pokemon Go has the new PvP feature that was introduced maybe roughly a year ago, where you can actually battle against other people. And there's a relatively official format in the Great League where Pokemon up to 1500 CP can battle it out against other trainers, and it actually have some really cool elements kind of built within the free mobile app Pokemon Go. And I will say, King, one of the things that kind of struck me by Pokemon Go PvP that really kind of blew my mind is, at first I thought it was a very simple battle format, and that would kind of take away from competitive Pokemon, which is something I've done pretty extensively in the main series 3DS games and now moving to the Switch. But the Pokemon Go PvP format is anything but simple, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. I do think that there's less strategic elements. There's certainly less variables, but that's compensated by the faster pace. Like, it's all mostly real time, so you have to make decisions on the fly, and each turn takes about 1 second. So if you take 2-3 seconds to make a critical decision, you're probably going to end up losing the match. So that fast pace does really go well with a simplified version of the battle mechanic. That makes it really interesting, and you can certainly implement a lot of strategies that you couldn't otherwise.
Yeah, there's some really cool elements to Pokemon Go PvP that we're going to dive into in a little bit here, but I wanted to get a little bit of a backstory on you, King, before we kind of jump into the good stuff here for PvP. How long have you been playing Go? Like, what kind of got you into the game in the first place?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I've been playing Pokemon Go since July 2016. So since the
Yeah,
Canadian
launch.
release.
Yep.
Yeah, and what actually got me into it was so I teach at a university, and my students were playing the US release version, which was released about 10-11 days before the Canadian release, and they were actually catching like a Voltorb in class, and I thought it was really interesting to catch Pokemon out in the wild. And I played the main series game when I was much younger. So when it came out in Canada, I had to download it right away. I watched a bunch of trainer tips videos to help me get ready, and it's just exploded since then, as part of a really big part of my life.
Yeah, and that's super awesome. And when PvP was first released, did you jump into it right away? Like, what ultimately kind of sparked your fuel or passion to do PvP specifically? Since you had previously been obviously playing through regular Pokemon Go, just catching and stuff like that. Like, what made you really want to jump headfirst into the PvP aspect?
Yeah, so for myself, I'm actually not really that competitive a person. So I'd really hoped that PvP came out, but mostly because a lot of my friends in the community really wanted PvP, and they kept posting my channel like, "Oh, I hope they release PvP soon." But I actually didn't think I was gonna get that into it. And then I entered in my first Silph Arena tournament during their beta testing phase, and I had won that tournament. And I posted online and on Twitter that I'd won, and a lot of people were asking me for advice. And as a teacher and as someone that aspires to help people get better, is when I started posting more content in relation to Pokemon Go PvP. And then I saw how interesting and watchable the competitive aspect was, and then that certainly helped me go towards my goal of trying to make Pokemon Go PvP into an esport.
Yeah, and that actually touched on a few things that we had previously talked about before the call. One thing I wanted to mention was the fact that you are approaching this in a very unique kind of situation. You're not trying to become the biggest Pokemon Go content creator or the biggest PvP content creator. Your primary goal is to educate and to spread Pokemon Go PvP, to grow the scene, not for your own gain, but really for the kind of community's gain. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And as making it into an esport is just like, I'm really focused on building community and building something aspirational for people, and making Go Pokemon Go PvP into an esport is not something that, when people initially saw the features, like similar to yourself, where they didn't think like it was like that complicated or that necessarily that interesting. And that's totally understandable when you look at it at face value. But once you dive further into it, there's a lot of potential, and I really want to unlock that potential for people that are really passionate about this, and demonstrating and helping people reach all sorts of levels.
Yeah, and kind of touching on that point of things like being less interesting when you first look at it. I'll say, guys, like I was talking to King before. I had entered my first kind of PvP tournament, not really expecting much out of it, and I was actually blown away at the depth in terms of team building, and then also like real-time battles. You have to really time your shields out. You have to time your leads out. You have to predict based on how long your opponent has charged up their attacks, what charge move they might be going for. There's the strategy of baiting charge moves, so maybe using a charge move that's faster to charge, that maybe isn't super effective to try to bait the shield. Like there's so much prediction game and like so much strategy that goes into PvP Pokemon Go that I definitely kind of encourage you guys to at least explore it, because I was initially very turned off from the idea of PvP in Pokemon Go, and my opinion was completely turned around just by trying it myself. I have to say, like, I was very impressed, and there is a lot of strategy that goes into it. So I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about, actually, let me take a step back, because I definitely wanted to touch on this. You mentioned the Sylph Arena. Can you perhaps give a few different resources aside from your own YouTube channel that newer players can maybe go to get some insight and information regarding Pokemon Go PvP? And I'll put those in the description for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the best resources, and I would say the number one resource is a website called pvpoke.com. And what this website does is does a number of different things. So the first thing that I really find attractive, for especially for newer players, is that there's a ranking list. And within this ranking list, you can look at like Open Great League, where there's no rules or restrictions, and it'll show you the top Pokemon, give a rating up from 0 to 100, and in different situations, as an attacker, as a lead, as a defender, shows like the top Pokemon that it counters and the top Pokemon that counter it. So it's a really great way to start with what Pokemon should you be powering up, and then it goes through. It also like breaks down for each meta and shows like how each meta and rules and restrictions like place Pokemon at the top or place Pokemon further down. And then as well, they have a simulator where you can click on battle and then put Azumarill versus Deoxys, and with different movesets, with different shield combinations, like each person using one shield, each person using zero shield, one person using one shield, other person using zero. And then as well, they actually have a simulator where you actually can practice PvP. So if you don't have that particular Pokemon powered up, so I see in your little picture thing, you have a Mega Beedrill. There's no Mega Beedrill in Pokemon Go yet, but you can practice Beedrill versus how does Beedrill do versus Deoxys in real time and get a sense of the timing. Another really great resource is the Go Stadium Discord, which is the largest PvP Discord, and that's where all the most advanced discussion is around Pokemon Go PvP. They're the ones that discover, for the most part, all the sleeper picks, the Pokemon that people that aren't really ranked really high, but have like really key matchups against some of the meta Pokemon that people bring. And then as well, there's a lot of other great websites like PokeBattler, a lot of other great content creators, and I could go through a whole list of them. But if you just search Pokemon Go PvP, there's a lot of really prominent and really growing base of great content creators that really break down Pokemon Go PvP in a really simplistic manner and give you a lot of rules and tips that help you get better.
Yeah, that was really good stuff. I'm gonna check out the pvpoke.com because that's a website that I definitely want to see myself. I can tell you from my experience, and one thing that you mentioned was like every month there's different tournaments that take place, and I did the Twilight Cup, I believe it was, which basically broke it down so they pick specific types and you can only use Pokemon that fit in that type. So for me, it was Ghost, Poison, I want to say Psychic and Dark were the 4 types that were allowed in that cup that month that I did the PvP. And I remember like one of the biggest things was like Toxicroak was like super duper top tier in that specific month, and like a super great counter to it was Venomoth because it gets the fast move Confusion, which is a very fast attack that charges your kind of your charge attacks really quickly. So there was some really interesting kind of counters going on there. I remember you mentioned some sleeper picks. I remember Dustox being a pretty big sleeper pick. Some people kind of utilizing Dustox. There was even things like Gloom with Razor Leaf because it charges its attack so fast. One of the best kind of quick attacks or fast moves in the game. So there was some pretty interesting dynamics there when it came to determining a team and ultimately like trying to go either meta or counter meta or being able to kind of cover those holes. And that kind of segues us to your Worlds team, which was very interesting. Some of the Pokemon are very, very meta. Some of them seem a little bit kind of different. So let's kind of take a peek at the team that you used for Worlds and talk a little bit about what you decided to use. So I see you've got the Azumarill, which I know is a very, very top tier pick. Its ability to fire off water type moves and ice type moves. Then obviously the fairy type play rough. You've got Skarmory, which I know is a top defender. You went with Swampert, Deoxys Defense, with the mythical Pokemon. Umbreon, of course, from the Community Day, rockin' Last Resort, another very tanky Pokemon. And then the region exclusive Tropius, which has some pretty interesting stuff. So if you don't mind, rather, breaking down some of those picks and kind of what your thought process was going into the tournament, and kind of what maybe was your MVP and maybe what you would have changed, I guess.
Yeah, really, I broke down my team. I watched a ton of Pokemon Go PvP content. For me, it's very important to always be learning. So I actually developed the core of my team, which was Defense Deoxys and Umbreon, by watching the Go Stadium draft tournament, where went through a draft process and then competed against each other in a double elimination. And someone mentioned that Defense Deoxys and Umbreon core is very strong, especially in freestyle where there's no rules. And I started exploring that. So Defense Deoxys is arguably the best freestyle Pokemon, because of its tankiness, because it has the best fast move in the game, which is Counter, has really great coverage in Psycho Boost and in Rock Slide or Thunderbolt. But it's very weak to Pokemon like Haunter, like Sableye. And Umbreon is able to effectively cover those Pokemon, and then as well as vice versa. Umbreon, very tanky Pokemon, has access to Last Resort, has really great Dark moveset, and then a lot of his weaknesses are covered by Defense Deoxys. So then I kind of built my team from there, and I went with Azumarill, just because Azumarill's probably the best generalist in Great League, and has really great coverage with Ice Beam to cover against at least threaten grass Pokemon that come in. And then I needed a flyer, so I debated between Skarmory, Altaria, and Lugia. I ultimately went with Skarmory, just because I'm most comfortable with using it, and then it's very tanky, has really great typing. And then I needed to deter other water Pokemon. So I debated between Venusaur, Victory Bell, and Tropius. And ultimately, I went with Tropius because I wanted to be its fellow grass Pokemon. And that was based off the moveset I selected. And then Swampert, with ability to get Hydro Cannon from the Community Day exclusive move, which does a ton of damage, charges super quick, was going to be a really big threat on my team. But really, what ultimately differentiated my team, because it's a pretty meta team, is the movesets I picked. So I chose to go Rock Slide on Deoxys, because it beats the fellow Deoxys that has Thunderbolt, even though Thunderbolt is arguably better against some of the meta Pokemon like Azumarill and Skarmory. And I decided to go Play Rough instead of Hydro Pump, because Play Rough allows me to win the mirror match against Azumarill that had Hydro Pump, and I decided to go Air Slash instead of Razor Leaf on Tropius to allow me to effectively beat any grass Pokemon that my opponent picked.
Yeah, that's some really high level analysis. I love to hear. I love to hear that breakdown there of that team. Some really cool stuff, man. And I gotta ask, kind of jumping from that. Now, for me, looking into this, this has been since Worlds, I've been really thinking about this a lot. I look at my Pokemon Go team, and I look at the Pokemon I have, and as you know, creating a competitive team for these leagues each month, and just a great league team in general, the beauty is 1500 CP is the cap for these Pokemon, so you don't necessarily have to spend a ton of Stardust, but simultaneously, there is a pretty big investment in terms of game resources to get a good PvP team. How important do you think it is to have a Pokemon, like let's say Azumarill? I'm going to open up my Pokemon Go app right now as we're talking, and I'm going to look at my Azumarill that I use for Great League, and I guarantee you it's not $14.99. How important do you think it is for some of these Pokemon to be perfect or close to perfect for people who are just starting out or people competing? Like, obviously, not all of us have a ton of time to play and maybe don't have the resources. Maybe are only thinking about PvP right now. I'm just kind of curious as to your like mine is 1492. Like I go look at mine, it's 1492. It's got perfect attack, perfect defense, but its HP is only 10 instead of 15. So like how much do you think that weighs into a battle when it comes to competitive PvP in Pokemon Go?
Yeah, when you're starting out, I would say IVs are the 10th most important thing when it comes to battling. picking the right Pokemon, picking the right moveset, picking the right team composition, the lead. There's a whole different part of scenarios that play much more important than Pokemon Go PvP IVs. So IVs are important once you get to the nitty gritty details. As you saw in some of my matches, I won by like 1 or 2 HP, which ultimately was a difference in IVs to allow me to actually win those matches. But majority of those matches are generally not decided by a few IVs, because usually you faint due to a charge move that like over feints you, does way more damage than your remaining HP. So I don't think IVs are that important. But if you are interested in IVs, I think just getting a Pokemon near 1500 is probably most important. And then the second most important, debatably this is more important, is actually to have lower attack, higher HP, and higher defense. And the reason for that is because the way the CP formula works in Pokemon Go is that one attack IV gives twice as much CP as on average as a defense and HP IV, but they're weighted in value about the same in Pokemon Go. So for the most part, you want more defense and more HP and lower attack, just so that you can optimize that CP as much as possible. But for the most part, you can win matches with really terrible IVs. A lot of the best players in the world have like a very poor IV Skarmory or Azumarill relative to what's the best possible.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, and one thing that I wanted to make sure we touched on, because for me to hear that, that's great to know, and for you guys to hear that, that might be interested in PvP. Don't stress about those little things. Like, it is a big Stardust cost for a lot of these Pokemon, but at least you're only going to 1500. So for a Pokemon like Swampert, which can obviously be powered up way beyond that, it's really not that big of a Stardust cost when you think about it. The biggest is going to be kind of unlocking those third moves for a lot of these Pokemon. But one thing that I love is when I was doing my kind of heavy research on PvP when I competed, I noticed that a lot of times, a lot of these guides each month that come out, I was actually using the Reddit subreddit for Silpharina. That was kind of what I was using as my main focus. They provide budgetary kind of options for Pokemon that maybe are less expensive to kind of power up Stardust wise. So like I remember for the Twilight Cup, Alolan Raticate was a pretty good budget option because Rattata itself doesn't really cost a lot to unlock its third charge move. Same with Azumarill, because you can hatch an Azurill because it's a baby Pokemon. Its Stardust cost for the third move is much less. So there are kind of budgetary options that you can go and kind of seek out, and I would definitely recommend kind of looking into some of these websites, as King kind of alluded to, and not stressing so much about those individual stat points, because chances are they aren't going to make a difference. And ultimately, I think you would agree, the goal here is to get out, kind of spend some time with the community, have some fun competing, and just enjoy Pokemon, right?
Absolutely. When you go to these tournaments, I'm sure you had a very similar experience, is that it's a totally different situation once you get into the tournament. People are really friendly. You get into some really good matches, and the camaraderie has been, for the most part, the tournaments I've been to have been really good. Very few people are upset when they lose, and sometimes when you lose a really close match, you're like, oh wow, that was an amazing match. Thanks for those battles, and you just move on to the next match. So the community has been really great and really positive for the most part.
Yeah, that's super duper good. One of the recent additions to Pokemon Go was the Team Rocket Invasion event, which introduced Pokemon Go PvP to the casual player through Pokestop battles against some pretty easy grunts, but there's a few tough ones. I know there's the one with like Snorlax and Dragonite that actually gave me some trouble for sure. It took me, I think, 5 tries to beat it. What other elements would you like to see Pokemon Go kind of add for PvP, and kind of where do you see PvP headed for kind of a bigger picture in Pokemon Go?
Yeah, so I do think support from Niantic and or Pokemon Company, it would be super huge for Pokemon Go PvP. Whether that comes from like more official tournaments sanctioned by the Pokemon Company, similar to the Invitational, but open more to the public. I know recently today, we'll see how it pans out. Trails, one of the Pokemon Go PvP, Pokemon Go data miners, actually data mined that there's a competitive ranking Who knows what that ultimately means? But if there's in-game competitive ranking, like a BattleNet system where you can go and battle people online with certain rules and restrictions, and then get points and rankings that way, that would go a very long way for Pokemon Go PvP. But for the future of PvP, I do think that esports is on the agenda and is on the horizon. Uh, Support from Pokemon Company would accelerate that. But even without that support, there's a lot of like grassroots movements with Go Stadium, with Silpharina, that is putting PvP on the map. And I think this invitational was a really great display of how exciting the battles were. I think there was 13,000 people watching consistently the live stream, which was the second biggest event for Pokemon Worlds all that weekend. And some people were I got a lot of comments from my friends and on my feed saying, I don't even like Pokemon Go PvP, but I can't stop watching. These matches are so exciting. So a lot of like casual fans really were on the edge of their seats and with those amazing battles ahead with PoGoKieng.
Yeah, dude, there were some really good battles, and that's so true. Like, just so glued to the screen watching these battles because they're super fast paced, as we talked about at the beginning of this video. They're just so fast paced, and you can really kind of get behind it. And one thing that I love, I don't know how you feel about it, but I love that some of these Pokemon that maybe aren't meta relevant in the main series games have a chance to shine in PvP. Tropius being a good example of that. The Pokemon is generally considered absolute garbage here when it comes to competitive in the main series games, but it's super cool to see some of these Pokemon kind of get some action in a different light. I know there's a ton of different Pokemon that maybe aren't super good in the main games, but have their own kind of niche in Pokemon Go PvP. So I think that's super duper cool. And it's gonna be exciting to see kind of how this develops. I think that ranking system could be cool. I had mentioned on Twitter kind of after the World Championships, like there's some things that I think they need to focus on. One being the ability to just challenge people pretty freely online. I don't know if you're familiar with Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, but you can type in a 3 Pokemon battle code like Pikachu, 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 or Eevee, Diglett, Pikachu, and connect to another trainer that way. And that could be a really cool way to have a simplified online system where you can connect to different people, do practice matches, hold tournaments online. Like, that's a necessary piece, I think, to this puzzle to ultimately get Pokemon Go PvP to where it can be and where it should go. There's definitely a lot of potential, man. I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. I agree 100% with all those points.
Yeah, so it's going to be cool to see that. And dude, it was great having you on here, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and kind of showcase a little bit of Pokemon Go PvP to the aDrive army. King, do you have anything you wanted to add before we kind of wrap this up?
Well, I just thanks for having me on, and thanks for everyone that contributes to the Pokemon Go PvP community. There's a really amazing community, and we welcome anyone that wants to join or compete. You can hit me up on Twitter or on my YouTube channel, or catch me on Discord, on the Go Stadium Discord. Happy to answer any questions to get people more involved in PvP.
That's super duper awesome, man. Big shouts to Kieng here, guys. The Pokemon Go PvP World Champion. This guy is all about trying to grow the community. Doesn't really care about his own gain as a YouTuber, which I love to see. And I'm sure, as the scene grows, your channel will grow and people will dig all the awesome content you're putting out. I'm going to do a collection of links in the description below, guys. Be sure to check out Kieng on Twitter, his YouTube channel. Make sure you check out all the references that he mentioned before. I'll put all those down there. The Discord server, all that good stuff. There's tons of resources out there. I can tell you, I've been itching to play Pokemon Go, and I'm not even kidding, since this event I'm like, what do I power up? What do I get ready for the Great League? I'm like, do I even max this Pokemon anymore? I just want to get it to 1500, like getting my shinies to 1500 so I could use them. So I've been jazzed up about it since the event. I just feel like there's so much potential, and I got to encourage you guys, try it out. Seriously, I was one of the biggest skeptics. I remember, I'm sure if I dug through tweets, I could find tweets of me being like, PvP is stupid. Why are they adding this to Pokemon Go? This is dumb. They should focus on other stuff. And I was completely wrong. I'll admit it right now. I had a blast at the tournament that I competed at, and I definitely want to jump into more PvP in the future, man. So, dude, it was amazing having you. I really appreciate your time, and I hope everyone checks out the description below. King, thank you again, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you.
Hey, all right, guys, that's going to be the end of this video. Be sure to check out King's channel. Follow him on Twitter. Do all that good stuff. You guys know all the resources. Thank you again for watching. I'm going to catch you guys next time for myself and the Pokemon Go PvP World Champion, Kieng. My name is Dan. I also go by aDrive, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.